Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Time Sphere channel. Today, Xavier, we've got a little bit less to talk about than the last preview we did. But while I was out in San Diego for the Dragon Ball Sparking Zero preview, which is also up on the channel, so if you're interested in that game, go check out our content on that, either on the YouTube channel or over on Booster Blogs, where I've got the written preview up. I also got to play the full expansion that's coming to Tekken 8, obviously the DLC itself, which is, I believe, let me double check. Unforgotten Echoes is the name of the actual story expansion that's coming to the game, which is Tekken 8's first ever story expansion. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that in the preview write up. So if you want to go read about my thoughts on what this means for Tekken, I'll keep that to the written preview over on Booster Blogs, which is also up now. If you want to go read that instead of or once you're done listening to this, but I got to play the entire DLC story, which I was not expecting, but they did basically just walk us into a room and say, "Hey, go at it. You got 2 hours." And then you'll and then lunch, and then I got an hour to play versus mode with the other players in the room, and just kind of experience Heihachi in his full glory as he comes back to the game in a new and almost surprising way. Obviously, I can't talk about everything in the story. I can only talk about the first several chapters. It is a decent chunk, but I'm gonna even try and keep that to a minimum because I do think that this being an expansion to Tekken 8's story, which I do love. I do love Tekken 8's story and the lore it provides. I'm not a huge Tekken guy. Tekken 7 was the first one I actually bought for myself. But I've experienced the lore throughout, and I've watched a lot of Tekken over the years. And the Tekken 8 story, especially the finale of that story, really set the stage. And the story of this DLC does tie into that in a way that's really cool in like what we've never seen before. And I will preface this because we're gonna start with talking about Heihachi as a character, and then we're gonna transition into the story. But I did want to mention they did a really cool thing with this story of um other than so I can say that the main trio that you play as outside of like Heihachi when you get to him in the story is Eddie, Lydia, and then Yoshimitsu, oddly enough, because Yoshimitsu was not in the main story. So they just kind of had to find a way to put him into the story, I guess. Or what was he doing during this? So he and Eddie are best friends now, I guess.
Awesome.
So very, very funny that he's there. But this is a really cool way of introducing DLC characters in a playable fashion because this the story DLC is going to be free for everybody. So everybody's going to be able to experience this. It's 8 chapters, I believe, story of this new expansion. So you're going to be able to play as Eddie, Lydia, um, and Heihachi in this story without having to buy them. So it's a great way to kind of give people a chance to test out the character and see if they might like to either buy the season pass or get the characters individually. I think that's a really cool little thing that they did. That's just another little feather in the cap of this being the first kind of expansion for a Tekken game. But I did get to play a lot of Heihachi. I played with people. I played by myself. A bunch of us sat there trying to do combos for a while, trying to find the wall combos. Shout out to my buddy TJ over at Shack News who found a very very strong wall combo right as we were getting ready to have to shut down all the consoles. So yeah, it was a good time. It was a very good time. Shout out to Bandai for the opportunity again. But let's get into it. There's a lot to talk about in terms of Heihachi's character. Again, I'm not going to talk about everything. I didn't take a lot of detailed notes because we didn't have a lot of. We only had like 30 minutes technically to play with Heihachi in versus mode because we also had to do interviews during that time for a 15-minute section. So we didn't get a lot of time to do like detailed breakdown on playing Heihachi. So we spent a lot more time with the DLC than Heihachi's character. But um, I'll do my best to kind of summarize what we've got in terms of new stuff that we have for the character. So go ahead and ask away, Xavier.
Perfect. And I'm the resident tournament sweat of
Yeah.
of the show, so this is definitely right up my wheelhouse getting to ask you Tekken questions. But really just the first one obviously is So how do Heihachi's moves feel in Tekken 8? Because Tekken 8 has a very aggressive style compared to Tekken 7. So how does that translate for him?
So I'll read the full quote here in a bit. But during my interview with Nakatsu-san and Michael Murray, obviously two of the main leads on the game, they basically said that the goal of Heihachi in this game was to take away, not take away, to change the dynamics. So every character they reworked from other Tekken games into Tekken 8. So like a lot of Tekken 8 characters have a lot of tools from other Tekken games pulled into their moveset in different ways. Heihachi is a little bit different because while I didn't play a lot of them in Tekken 7 and I don't have like the history of playing older Tekken games, I know for a fact that Mishimas, depending on the Mishima, do this kind of pokey proddy kind of style where they're going in and out. They're weaving. Obviously, like we were talking about backdashes when we were getting ready to film this, but they kind of tone that down with Heihachi, which is much different than Tekken 7 because I know he had like a backhand hit that's like infamous in Tekken 7, but they toned that down and gave him kind of this more when you see the fights. I don't know if you've seen the fight scene between I believe I don't remember what game it's in, but it's the fight scene between Heihachi, Kazuya, and Jin, where they're all just going at each other and like stopping each other from finishing off the other one and just like going ham. In that fight, you can kind of get a feel for how each of them fight compared to each other, where Kazuya's like this middle ground, Jin is a little more technique, and then Heihachi's just like brute force. This is like the brute force that you would think a Heihachi would play with all the time, kind of distilled into all of his different things. Now we'll get into it in a second, but there is something that comes into play with this character that's unique to him with this expansion and with this version of the character that I will not spoil like the specifics of like what it is, but the way it changes him over the course of you doing certain things in a match does kind of bring out a little bit more of the previous Heihachis that you've played as, but he is a lot more powerful and like the word Michael used was overbearing. Like he feels like he's going to come at you and just relentlessly come at you instead of just kind of like do a combo and then like kind of back off and poke a little bit to try and do the damage over time.
Overbearing is a fantastic description.
Mm.
I really don't look forward to playing against. So the big system mechanic of this this Tekken is the heat mechanic. So how does heat affect his moves? And does heat give him like any new moves? Because we've seen that with Lydia and Eddie, that heat gives them new moves and also affects how they play pretty consistently.
So I can't speak to like giving him new moves, like if it just like changes how, like, because obviously Lydia is like the best example of that with how she counters and does different things using her meters and just like the different inputs, but it does affect him in a very significant way, in a way that we haven't seen before. So he's almost got an install that he gets when using heat, but it's only through using heat over the course of rounds. So it's not something you get right away. So I believe it's called, I didn't write this down because I didn't go into like the settings for it or anything, but I believe it's called Warrior Instinct, I think is what Murray referred to it as during the interview, where over the course of, I think you have to use heat 3 times over the course of a round to unlock the full potential of Warrior Instinct, which basically is an install that you get, and once it's unlocked, it unlocks so much. Like it basically gives him a buff. Like he's a buffed character now. It unlocks like different moves. Different moves can chain into each other that couldn't do before. So like the connections, like the threads to your combos are different. It does unlock new moves, but it's like it's this very strange, like almost kind of the specifics of it are a little like, you're gonna have to like listen to the breakdown. They're gonna release the breakdown at the same time this is going out, so if you want the heavy specifics, go to that. But the way this works is basically like, if you're playing Heihachi, you're not playing with a debuff, you're not playing like bad at a base level, but you don't get the same things that Eddie or Lydia get, where your heat might give you something extra right away. You're basically playing the long game. So as Heihachi goes in a match, if you can consistently use your heat, you will unlock Warrior Instinct, and then you will gain essentially the ability to um just do more. It that you get the buff for executing throughout your games, whether you're winning or losing. So by the third round, I believe it's you have to use it. I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 times. Because I think it would need to be two because there's best of two, like to play into a best of three.
Mhm.
Uh, but so best of fives would be different. But yeah, I believe that is the case where it's just you have to use it twice or 3 times over the course of a round and you get it in the third one. So
That sounds obnoxious.
it was obnoxious. I'll tell you that it felt obnoxious. Even just fighting him in story mode,
Mhm.
it felt obnoxious without it. So being able to see what he can do with it is something else. And obviously, like there'll be some footage playing of uh, the versus mode with or without it or whatever I'm allowed to show that is not part of the story, because obviously there's story elements that tie into uh, what gives him this ability because he didn't have that before. But overall, it's a super cool way of like basically rewarding resource management, because you're not trying to just like if you hold your heat for too long, you're not going to get it out in that round, and you might just not see Warrior Instinct in that match.
Mhm.
So
And oh man. So I guess, for people that kind of know Lydia, Lydia sort of has like a similar sort of, I guess, system where she can build up stocks.
mhm.
And then once she kind of has full stocks, like a lot of her moves will do more damage and she becomes much more of a threat. Is this similar where I guess once you get, I guess, the buff, like you kind of just have it? Or is it kind of similar to Eddie where maybe once you get the buff, like do you have to like build it up again? Because like a Tekken round can go like up to like six rounds. So I guess how does that work? I guess just a specific.
So I was looking through, and you might have heard it a little bit before I
Mhm.
cut off the audio. Not you, the listeners at home might have heard it a little bit before I cut off the audio. But looking back through the audio, the way Michael explains it here is a little bit inconsistent with what I think it is. So you're probably going to want to check the specifics on like the actual breakdowns that they're going to be publishing at the time of this launch. So uh, basically, he says once around at round three, so you have to use heat 3 times, and he has it once a match, is what he
Mm,
said, not a round,
okay.
and you have to do heat 3 times. So I don't know if that means it fades after the third round. So obviously we didn't get to play around a lot with actually playing with this. You got to see it a little bit in the story, but that doesn't really fit the same kind of narrative as like seeing it in a versus setting.
Yeah.
So what Murray's saying here is once a match, and you have to use heat. You basically get it in round three if you use heat leading up to it. So that sounds about right, but I don't know if it fades after that. So you get like a 1 round buff and then it's gone. I'm not 100% sure on that. It does kind of work like Lydia's thing though, because you have to use heat. You have to do it.
Mhm.
I also don't know if like you use it in 1 round and then don't use it in the next round, if that resets the counter. Uh, but it does build. It does over the when you use the heat, that meter will build, and then once you unlock it, you have access to it at the start of the round, and then see throughout that round, and then if it goes away in the next round, if the match doesn't end, then so be it. So the terminology in fighting games can be really inconsistent between like who's talking about it, between like a round and a match. That depending on the fighting game, that can mean two different things. Like a match could mean best of three, which is usually what it means, but in some cases, people refer to a round as a match. So, um, from what I understand, you have to use heat 3 times to unlock this, regardless. But I don't know if it goes away. Off the
Okay.
top of my head, I did not get to test that when I was going through it.
And last question. It seems like I guess just about his gameplay. It seems like there are a lot of big changes. So how do you think legacy players are going to feel once they get their hands on Heihachi? Will a lot of the skills translate, or will there be like a legit adjustment period of them kind of having to learn the new systems with him?
There's going to be an adjustment period purely because the way he does things is different. So like that overbearing nature that we talked about, and once we're done, and once I'm done answering this, I'll read the full quote once we're into the story portion of the talk. But the way they changed him, uh, Nakatsu-san talked about giving him new lease on the style in a way, like using new stances and using like he used the word graduating in one of the quotes. Like Heihachi graduated into using new forms of technique that were not present in his previous styles. So you're gonna see a lot more. I think in the base form you're gonna see a lot more of like, but before you unlock Warrior Instinct, not that anything involving like a actual install that changes him like a devil or anything. Like he doesn't. There's nothing like that that will change him at a structural level as a character. Everything still flows even when you have the Warrior Instinct, but I think you're going to see more of like the changed elements in just his base of how he's fighting. And then maybe that evolves even further when you get the Warrior Instinct and you start seeing even more wild stuff that's changed completely. So there is going to be a significant change if you play. Like if you played a Heihachi in T7, you're probably gonna have to relearn a lot of stuff because he does not play like T7. There's elements of him that are obviously the same, just like with every Tekken 8 character. There's elements of their T7 self or their previous iterations in their characters, but it's all reworked into something entirely new. And for Heihachi, it feels specifically like because like when Lydia came out and Lydia was my T7 main, and I came back to playing her in T8, I could still do a lot of the same Lydia stuff just with extra sauce, or like you had to change up certain things here or there, and some of the flow didn't work. But for Heihachi, it feels like I'm assuming because I didn't play a lot of Heihachi, and I didn't play like any Heihachi in T7 because I don't play Mishimas. But it feels like there's going to be a pretty big adjustment period just for anybody that might have played a lot of Heihachi and is going to come into this thinking he's going to play like a mixture of old Heihachis. He's got a lot more new stuff than I think people might be ready for initially, or might have been expecting. So,
All right, Kale, give me the lowdown on some story stuff. Like this is the Tekken 8 base story was pretty sick. So I guess what were some of the thoughts going into I guess just this new story mode?
so jumping into it, obviously this is the first big expansion that Tekken's ever done. Like, obviously they've had DLC content before, but in terms of like first story expansion, first like additive kind of content post that's not just extra characters and maybe some like skins and stages and stuff. So I was going in wondering what they would do, how big it would be. Uh, it's not huge, so it's 8 chapters, but compared to like, I don't know. Do you remember how many chapters the story was for Tekken in 8's base? Because it's not. It feels like each of the chapters here are shorter than the base game's chapters were. Because we got 2 hours with it, and I was
There are 15 chapters.
okay. So
Tekken.
that about checks out because you can beat the Tekken 8 story if you don't struggle with it in probably about 4 or 5 hours.
Mhm.
This took 2 hours, and there was like if you're not used to Tekken, which like by the time you play the main game, you'll probably be able to handle the DLC too. But there are some hard fights in this DLC. Like there are a couple fights that I had to do a couple times. Like even just play. I think I was playing on intermediate difficulty, but there were a lot of people that were like they're like in the middle. There's like some pretty decently challenging fights, especially since you're going to be playing against a couple characters that aren't actually characters. So like, obviously you fight Heihachi and you're going to fight a couple of characters that you know, but there are a couple characters like once you start learning about where Heihachi is and like his training and stuff that aren't characters from previous games and aren't characters that are playable or in any way, shape, or form, and they have their own movesets and stuff. So they're just like completely unique NPCs that you haven't fought before that you're now having to learn and play against like in mid story. So there's a lot of depth here, which is to be expected because they kind of hyped up that this was going to bring a lot of depth and relevance to what was already existing in Tekken 8. But I went in expecting quite a bit, and I got a full 2 hours of like actual like hefty content with a solid beginning, middle, and end that plays directly into what we know from the Tekken 8 story and sets up what could be another expansion later. And they talked a little bit about this in interviews. I'll let the other articles that came out that come out from this to in these interviews talk about. I believe Mitchell Saltzman from IGN is going to have this specific answer in his piece, but what's next for Tekken in terms of content like this, it leaves the door open for a lot without feeling too light or too bloated. It stayed the perfect amount of time for what you want and delivers on a lot, especially like some wild Tekken moments, which is exactly what you want after where Tekken 8 the main story ends. Like you expect that, and this matches its freak in a way that I was not expecting, and I was very happy with. A lot of us were very surprised. So just to like give the kind of the brief overview of this, I'm not even going to go into like specifics of like characters and stuff for the sake of, I think everybody should experience this, especially since it's free for anybody that has the game. Like, definitely play through this story. It's going to take you one sit down. But the main theme across the board from like when you are playing as Eddie in the first part, and kind of like learning what the themes and like what you're getting sent into, is basically just improving upon yourself by facing and overcoming your past. And the way they play on that throughout the use of the different characters and the use of different settings and like different challenges you have to face is very interesting. Like Eddie goes through it, Lydia goes through it, and Heihachi goes through it. So like you have 3 different parallels of like overcoming yourself. You get like a moment with Eddie and Jin where they talk about like Tekken 6 stuff, and like Eddie's I believe his mentor getting killed because Jin was too slow on acting, and all these other things from Tekken 6. You get a little bit of closure there with Eddie. And then Lydia is like talking about her past, which we didn't learn a lot about in T7 because she was a DLC character. So you actually like learn a bit more about her and her resolve and her striving to use her powers and her strength in different ways. And then obviously Heihachi, I'm not going to touch on at all because the storyline for him does a lot in that kind of facing your past and like what happened to him after he came to be with the Tekken monks, which I will talk about here in a second. But very fun like theming, which it kind of was there in the base game of Tekken 8, but Tekken 8's base game was less about the theme and more about like conclusions. But this definitely felt like the theme. It had a theme from minute 1 to the very end. It had a theme that it ran with, and it felt solid throughout. So, did you have anything else you wanted to ask, or do you just want me to keep...
I'm relentlessly excited right now.
Okay, well then I'll go through this. So, if you're a Tekken nerd, like lore nerd, I'm about to read a full quote from my section of the interview with Michael Murray. Obviously, go check out all the other previews that are coming out on the different websites. Other than just IGN, I was in there with I know for a fact I was in there with the guys from the main editor for Noisy Pixels, so go check out their coverage. And I can't remember Kate's website off the top of my head, so just make sure to like kind of scrounge around and go read all these previews because they're all going to be great in their own way. But this is my part of the quote from this interview where I asked specifically about what they wanted to make sure they included and how they were going to go about this story for Heihachi. So this is Michael Murray translating for Nakatsu-san and then also adding his own flair to it. The basic thinking is that Nakatsu, Harada, and myself, if you've watched the Tekken 8 opening movie and the story elements for the base game, you're probably familiar with how the story goes into more detail about the history of the Mishima family and the Saibatsu. So you get glimpses of this clan that has been fighting devils and evil incarnate from back in the feudal days, right? As an extension of that, you kind of see how two of the Mishima you see how the Mishima family changes and grows, and then becomes first Heihachi, and how he goes through that evolution of being that evil patriarch, and that being defeated by his son. And then you get a glimpse of also stuff we've never talked about, the Tekken monks and another group who actually were kind of heirs to that Mishima style, but it kind of dropped off because of, well, we can't talk about that, etc. But there's a different splinter. Heihachi training with this different group who are also part of that Mishima lineage and learning new techniques was something we really wanted to portray as kind of a new evolution of the character. So that was probably the main focus, was just trying to show that more background of that we hadn't really talked about in the past. So that not only plays into what we just talked about earlier with like the design philosophy of the character and evolving him in a new way, but you learn a lot about like the crux of the Tekken monks in the early part of the story, which is what we can talk about here, is trying to like not necessarily reclaim the Mishima style, but like take it back to a pure form that was lost in the past. As my dog comes over and says hi, but the idea is that through Heihachi you see what the monks are striving for and what they're trying to achieve with the Mishima legacy being what it is at the time of Tekken 8. And then you also hear, like Murray said there, the potential for the other splinter that fell off that we don't know about. And we're just learning about the Tekken monks, so we know even less about this other splinter that who knows what we could see there. Like, who knows what, like, there's still so many loose ends of Tekken 8 story alone that we don't get closure for here, and not in a bad way, just in like a way that it wasn't meant to tell that part of the story. But now we have even more to look forward to that we never knew about Tekken lore, on top of what we learned in Tekken 8's base game and what you get tangentially through parts of this DLC that aren't even the main through line for the story you're going through with Eddie, Lydia, and Heihachi.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels like they did a lot here to kind of set the stage for what's coming next for Tekken through the story. We had a lot of speculation as a group of just media people that are obviously going to talk about this, and I'm sure someone asked this. Someone might have asked it in mine. I didn't go through the entire interview, and this was a week and a half ago, so almost 2 weeks ago, so I don't remember the specifics here. But someone was like, okay, cool, we got Eddie, Lydia, and Heihachi as the DLC here, and the DLC goes through Heihachi. So does that mean DLC 4 is going to be the first guest character, and then we're going to repeat this process for the next DLC, where it's going to be 3 characters, and those characters are going to be tied to the DLC, or tied to another expansion next year? And from what I remember of the answer given, it's like Murray, in his like usual way, he and Nakatsu-san both are very funny. They were talking about like how, hey, if this is like really well received and people buy a lot of Tekken 8, because these are really expensive to do, like with the CGI and like even just the characters are super expensive to make now. But yeah, they're not 100, even I don't even think they're sure where things are going, because like obviously you get like all the different content that's coming with this update. You got the collaborations with Nike, you've got the new stages, you got the updated modes. I mean, I think with the Heihachi update you're getting I believe they said you're getting the online practice mode, so which is going to have full, basically every practice feature is going to be available online. It's not even a limited mode. So like they're doing a lot already. I hope that there's more, because this what I got to experience was not only more than I thought, just because I didn't think I was going to get to experience the whole story there, but is not only more than I was hoping for from this expansion, but also has me super excited to see what they do next. Even if they don't do another expansion like this, even if it's just more characters, I'm excited to see. I'm more excited now for what is coming from Tekken's future updates than I was before this expansion is happening.
Yeah, can't wait.
So I guess we'll wrap it up there. I will say, I should have said this at the beginning, but everybody will know this by the time they start watching this. We do know for a fact that Heihachi is launching in early access on October 1st. That's in Japan, so it'll be September 30th at 4 p.m. PDT. So he's going to launch at like 6 on 6 p.m. CT on September 30th in early access, and then he will be out in full for everybody on October 4th / October 3rd, depending on your time zones. So he'll be out. All this preview stuff is going out now. If you want like not necessarily a deeper breakdown, but I'm going to go more into my thoughts about what this expansion means as content overall, rather than just like Heihachi as a character, over on Booster Blogs. So if you want to go read that, go ahead. Obviously, we've got more content coming out. If you have any questions about this, feel free to hit me up. Can't answer everything. I'm still under embargo for some of the stuff, just because Bandai is very particular about how they want story stuff getting out, and I don't blame them, because the story is a very fun experience that I wouldn't want to ruin it for anybody. But go enjoy this when it drops on the 1st. Yeah, I mean, it was a blast playing it early. I'm sure everybody will have a good time with it, and I'm hoping that this leads to more cool stuff like this happening. God, I wish Street Fighter would do this for World Tour, but that's an issue for another day. So as always, thanks for listening. Tune in to the live show Mondays and Thursdays over on Twitch. Potentially multi-streamed on YouTube if YouTube will function properly as a multi-stream. Tune in to the podcast weekly on wherever you get it, or here on YouTube. And we'll see you next time.
Peace out.